Hi, welcome to Rope In Mental Health. I'm Garrett Kennedy, mental health consultant. Today I want to simplify fidgets. I've been talking to my wife and some of my colleagues and some of my friends from back in the day, and going through elementary school with attention deficit disorder and dyslexia myself, I kind of don't know if I wanted to have a fidget back then or not. Because here's the thing, fidgets are ultimately toys. They really are, and that is what they should be. The purpose of a fidget, in my mind and my opinion of all the different literature and the different life experience I've had, my friends have had, and my colleagues have had helping students with difficulties and addicts as well. And please excuse my term if you find that offensive, but people who struggle with addictions are often given fidgets. On Elementary, the Sherlock Holmes character uses a tangle, as they call it, also in Ragnarok, another TV show that features Thor. Anyway, it's a show on Netflix, Ragnarok. It was a great show, and the lead character in that show also used a tangle, and they kind of focused on this. And fidgets are becoming very vastly popular. But what I find is a problem is, when does a fidget become a toy? And what is the difference? Which begs the question, why do we have fidgets and what's the purpose? Well, first of all, what is a fidget? A fidget is something that's there to replace an annoying habit, really. So when you think of somebody who's clicking their pen all the time or bouncing their knee, or if maybe you yourself have some kind of a habit where people ask you to stop doing that and you're really not even sure you were doing it in the first place, again, oftentimes clicking a pen, doodling on a page, not looking at a speaker because you're fantasizing somewhere else, even though you are, in your own way, paying attention to that lecture or you're paying attention to the task at hand. I would oftentimes get in trouble because I would focus all of my attention on the teacher in university. I would stare at them intently because that's one of my coping mechanisms, is I have to very much focus on my auditory learning. So I'd focus, and I would be pulled aside by, I don't know how many teachers saying, take notes, take notes, take notes, especially with short-term memory difficulties and stuff like that, take notes. But the fact of the matter is, I find taking notes so distracting. So I find when people doodle during class about something completely fanciful, and their mind is obviously drifting off to create this artistic rendering as they're doodling on their page, but yet these are the star students who are taking notes and not labeled, or not neurotypically different, or neurodifferent, I guess. But doodling is one of those things that's just an acceptably, a socially acceptable form of fidgeting. So a fidgeting, something like this, can be used in many different ways. First of all, much like doodling or clicking your pen, you can quietly kind of roll them around. Now, these particular ones have an added bonus of being little meditation balls, and they can also be used as an auditory focus. If you're an auditory person wishing to escape into a little bit of mindfulness, or a little bit of meditation, or a little bit of just escapism, daydream. That's really all meditation is. Anyway, so a fidget can act as a personal aid or focus towards those calming techniques. And ultimately, that's what it's all about, is what tools appeal to you that actually help you get through a task and just kind of focus more directly. So if that makes sense to you, that's one use of a fidget. Another, and I find way more important use of a fidget, is an expression of an as yet undefined emotion. And what I mean by that is when somebody has this anxious yellow zone kind of, geez, I know things aren't going well, but I don't know what's wrong. Right? Like, you just know it's not right, but you don't know what right looks like yet. You have this, overwhelming sense of just anxiety or any other kind of unexplainable emotion that is somewhat distracting to yourself. And it can be caused by loss or bad news or an excitement to the future. It's just an unwanted escape from the task at hand. A fidget can also help you with that. So a fidget can help you escape, but a fidget can also help you avoid being pulled away by that part of you that wants to escape a boring task by giving it something to kind of focus on. So another fidget, just randomly grab the plant that I put there earlier. A deck of cards is one of my favorite fidgets. It can serve many different purposes. It is a little noisier. You'll find things like fidget cubes have been designed for people who like to click their pens. You can just go grab a fidget cube, and they have a little button on one side. Almost all fidget cubes do, where they, I'll do a review of a number of different fidgets one day. That'd be a good idea. Talking about ADHD. But the feel of the fidget in my hand actually was a tactile reminder to talk about fidgets. So anyway, as I was saying, right there is how it can be used off camera, nice and quietly. A fidget is something that can be used to stop your escapism. To ground you would be the term oftentimes used by life coaches and the like that would say you need something to ground you. Crystal, whatever it is, a deck of cards works great. It's got those little hard edges that if you kind of let your hand get into that fidgety movement, which if this is a tool that you're using, you kind of might have some way of manipulating it where it will remind you to constantly get back onto the topic and stop those escapist thoughts just from the tactile feel of it. The other use of fidgets in this way of expressing that undesired emotion, just kind of letting that happen in the background. Another aspect of that is if we can guide as counselors or as support people to those using fidgets, when is the correct time to use it and when is the correct time to put it away is really a hard lifetime decision that person's always going to have to make. However, if we give them a fidget and try to direct them to be using that while they're struggling with those undefined emotions or those blockage emotions, when they're hitting those feelings, we can actually give them an observable outlet, which is great because when you see the person starting to use that more often or less often, I mean, once you figure out what's normal for them, you can look for spikes on a daily or hourly, a moment-to-moment basis on whether or not that fidget use is because they're actually expressing a need for help. Because that's what it all comes down to, is teaching those people when they can solve a problem themselves by, say, a fidget or other coping mechanisms, and also knowing when can they ask for help or when should they ask for help. We as support people can start to recognize that by watching the use of the fidgets. And so we can guide them towards a fidget that works in the environment that they're in. And I do like a deck of cards. It's probably my all-time favorite fidget. I am not a card magician. I am not a card manipulator. Those people are fantastic. The skill of sleight hand is one thing that you can focus yourself into. But the great thing I like about a deck of cards is another use of a fidget. It is that intrinsic self-reward and break system. Everybody always says you should have a little bit of time working and then a short period of break to reorganize your thoughts. Like for studying example, study for a few hours, take a 10-minute break, study for another hour or so, take a 10-minute break, and off we go. Our work day is structured like that. Work for 2.5 hours, have a 15-minute break, work for another 2.5, have a half-hour break, and then so on and so forth is usually a person's 8-hour work day, at least where I am. However, One of the things that we can do to promote that is create a fidget, especially for workaholics or when you're getting too sucked into work. Even though it is the right task to be focusing on, there is a scale where that becomes a problem too. Fidgets can help with that. You could have a fidget on your hand that's pleasurable to work with. Oftentimes a video game for a child, or in this example, I'll use a deck of cards, is that you could set up a game of solitaire or a game that you enjoy playing. There was one child who was a very kinetic individual who I would teach him how to play leansies. Remember that game he used to play with hockey cards? Throw them against the wall and see who can get it as close as they can. A game of throwing the cards into a basket. Once I finish 10 cards, I'll feel good and then return to work, right? We could use if-then statements if you're supporting somebody who really likes to listen to that, right? I know you're working really hard on that project, but you do need to give it a break to have the best results at the end of the day. So, to promote breaks, you could suggest somebody have a deck of cards who enjoys whatever type of game you can play with cards, because there are lots. And you could tell that person, well, you know, every 2.5 hours, set an alarm, right? Using yet another tool to incorporate into the coping strategy. But if somebody is like a workaholic or too competitive or too focused on school and they're having anxiety in that other direction, a fidget can help with that because it can set up a reward system such as, you know, when the alarm goes off after 2.5 hours, I want you to take a random number of cards, I don't know, 10 cards, and try to throw them from 5 feet away into a basket. Once you finish that, I want you to try to throw them into that basket you know, again, or whatever. And however many times you're trying to build that, both that intrinsic, yay, I got so many in, because you're taking a competitive individual and giving them a competitive outlet to take a break so that they're not over competitive, if that makes sense. So you're giving them that fidget so that they can complete that subtask or that enjoyable task, give themselves that reward and remind themselves, I did throw in 7 out of 10 cards instead of 6 out of 10 cards, and I feel good that I did better about that. You can have them even dialogue through that. Now that I've taken a break, I feel refreshed and I need to go back to work, right? First, I finish this pleasurable task. Then I reward myself by reflecting on how well I did and feel proud I took a break, so I'm ready to go back to work. Would be how you would use that if, then, and format of communicating with somebody. The other reason I like a deck of cards is because sometimes you just need a break from the boredom. Everybody runs into a time in their day where they have to wait patiently. This can be difficult for those who are struggling with emotions. So again, a fidget can help with that. Be it just a center for them to meditate on and escape into an enjoyable thought pattern until the time is done and have a little daydream and a siesta, whatever. Or you can set up just a game for yourself, whatever it is. And I find a deck of cards is the most versatile, portable, inexpensive fidget that can be out there. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks so. Actually, I did grab the right cards. These cards that I'm just going to come closer. These cards that I grabbed, I love giving people for fidgets because they're actually from hold the card right. Ha, it's backwards. I haven't flipped my video yet, obviously. Still new at this game. Anyway, it's from Alberta Health Services. They're still producing these cards as far as I know, and they're fantastic. I've used these as a conversation tool with people I'm supporting many, many times. I've actually just cut to a random card and taken a look at what the topic is. See, what they've done is they've split all of the different suits to 4 categories of mental wellness. There's this was from the High River Flood. I think they developed these, but it's be prepared and create connections to stay calm, building on strengths in light of a crisis. So it's exactly the situation we're talking about now for the general populace. So diamonds are prepare. So they have little tips for preparing and whatnot, learning about your situation and all that. And spades, each spade represents a different point of recovery process, how to reach out for help, how to know when to reach out for help. You know, so many addicts I've talked to who have really hit rock bottom have told me how they thought they were coping well. That was just, you know, it's heartbreaking how many people tell me that. Anyway, which brings me to the heart. Heartbreaking. See there? Fidget got me back on task. The heartbreaking situation of a crisis. Also, apparently, if you draw a heart, you can talk about the connections we have with people, the connections we have with communities. And they've got little tips on each card on how you can reconnect with people, your community, and your associations and whatnot. And then the clubs, they are using respond. How can you respond in a crisis? Because in that moment, in that fight or flight moment, how are you going to prepare to respond? So in a deck of cards, you've got your 4 basic elements of being resilient and growing resiliency and being prepared, right? And being observant. Again, the same messages, just a different wrapping paper and bow than the one I'm using. But then being observant would be connecting to people and making sure that you're aware of your surroundings and really utilizing and knowing when to utilize your surroundings and being observant and mindful of all those situations in the being connected kind of a theme, right? Being positive is in there with the all throughout it, being positive and a positive mentality, a positive response, a positive movement towards growth, and all those kind of wonderful things. And of course, your environment, it is focusing on how do we connect everybody together in a network, or how do we mesh, or how do we weave together all of our strands of communication into a safety net that's going to care for us, and when do we know to fall in it on purpose? There's a neat trick too. So that's my thought on fidgets. I think we can use them. There's a lot more uses on fidgets. I could go on forever, but I think just as a vast overview for those of you supporting people with fidgets, find a way to let them use them, work with them. If that fidget is annoying in any way, tell them and help them find a different fidget that you're both happy with. Because ultimately, a fidget is a form of communication. It is a non-verbal communication of anxiety or strong emotion. Oftentimes, people will start fidgeting more when they're happy and excited and elated. And you can learn that this is a non-verbal cue that you can start training yourself to look for in the person that you're supporting. Strong proponent of fidgets for people struggling with emotional crises and trying to control their fight or flight responses to it. I hope you guys enjoyed my chat on fidgets, a brief overview anyways, and trying to simplify the concept. So thank you very much for listening. Carry on, and I don't know, like and support my page. Give me a comment or send me a message if you want me to review a bunch of different fidgets and some ways I think you can use them. Anyway, have yourselves a great day. Stay positive out there, people. This has been a fantastic world, and it will continue to be so. Enjoy.